Hello? Oh, there's somebody answering. It's Sadwings. Hello, Sadwings. How's it going? Ah, okay. Looks like we're on then. All right. Hello. This is the RPG Pundit, the final boss at Internet Shitlords, and now I'm here with you for a Monday night live stream. A lot of interesting things to talk about. We'll give people a little bit of time. I don't have one of those fancy intros like we have on Inappropriate Characters or like Diversity and Dragons has, right? So I'll spend a little time chatting with the people that are already here, and then I'll get to the subject so that we give people time to show up. So hello to everyone who's saying hello right now to Sadwings, Jeff Hatch, James Laurie, L, Seafire 2100, John Heaton, Terry, Steel Mongoose, Warplane, Bruce Maximus. Excellent. Seafire asks, what's in the pipe? Inside the pipe today, I am smoking Balkan Flake, specifically by Samuel Gawith. Am I blurry? Somebody said I'm blurry. Is the audio and video okay? Well, South American internet in Uruguay is pretty good. It's fiber optic and it works. It works okay. So I think there was something funny going on right at the start. Like I had a little trouble connecting, but I think now it's working. I don't know. You guys tell me. Anyway, Jeff Hatch says, "Are you blurry or am I old?" It could be both. I might be blurry because I'm old. I don't know. James Laurie says Black Lodge Games had a good video on X cards recently. Yeah, they did. I mean, it was very similar in some ways. I have much better production value, but it touched on something that I did several months back, a video on this channel called The Quiet Tantrum, where I was talking about X cards and other safety tools. And I think we touched on a lot of the same things, you know. So yeah, it was a good video. It was good production and everything. I recommended it on social media. We're not going to get into what X cards are today. That's says lefty thing, but there's too many things to talk about today for that, I think. Let me see. Right, says the meatball minder people are simple folk who become harder for others to see as they age. Yeah, that's right. We're designing new OSR races live right now. Yeah, well, you know, if you want to design crazy OSR races, you can always check out the Gonzo Fantasy Companion. It's one of the two books that were on the thumbnail for this live stream. All right, yeah, a bit of tobacco there. So it looks like we've got quite a lot of people already, 55 watching. That's excellent. So I suppose we could get started on this. You'll note I don't have a guest. I always wait till the last minute. I don't like bother to ask someone or find someone or something. So I just post when I first announce the video. I say, hey, you know, if someone wants to come and join me, you know, because there's now you can do that. You can have one person, one guest on a YouTube live stream without having to have StreamYard or other stuff like that, right? But yeah, I never get around to doing that. so I did it again this time where I posted like a message if somebody felt like it. If somebody wanted to be a guest star, they could let me know and I'd send them the joining link. But yeah, I haven't. It didn't happen, I guess. So one of these times that'll happen. Sadwing says, "Oh, bought me a Peterson 306 pipe today." Well, Petersons are very reliable and decent pipes, and one of my favorite pipes is a Peterson. I don't have a lot of Actually, I think I only have one Peterson, but it's one of my favorite pipes. All right, so don't know where to start here. I could start with the title subject, but maybe let's start with something funnier. So Diversity and Dragons did a whole video about this that was really hilariously excellent, about Goodman Games, and I'm sure some of you, I'm sure all of you who watched the D&D, the double D video have seen, you know all about this, but some of you maybe don't. So Goodman Games did this announcement. They were doing this big indie creator expo thing, and they advertised for it on social media and showed highlights of all of the special guests that they were going to have. And the woke mobs of the OSR went crazy because most of the people were visibly white males, And this is really funny because Goodman Games, and one thing that happened when this took place, where they suddenly started attacking Goodman, is that I realized that there was a bunch of people that didn't realize, because Dungeons & Crawl Classics is a great game. Nobody can question that, right? The core RPG is fantastic. But the simple fact is that Goodman has been woke for a really long time now. And so these were all woke white guys, male feminists or whatever, whatever you want to call them. Male progressives, the type of people that would have wanted to vote for Hillary to show how advanced they are, who decided to do this, and then they got stung back, right? And there were a bunch of people that are going, oh, well, Goodman, we have to fight for it, or Goodman's going to fight back or something. I'm going, no, they're not. And this, I kind of knew it even beforehand, but it really struck home once I was friends with Joe Bittman with Florida Man RPG, because he used to work at Goodman. And he told me they're all completely woke, right? Like it's a completely captured company. And so right away, when I saw people saying, well, we've got to defend Goodman, or Goodman's going to fight back against this or something, I was like, no, they're definitely not. They're going to do a mewing apology. And that's exactly what they did. They came out with this big apology about how dare they not make way for, creators of color and stuff like that. And then they did a new version of their big advertising sheet for the indie thing, and suddenly it was full of these women of color that you'd never heard of. But actually, the part that's missing there is that in the original production, it was full of people you hadn't heard about. And Double D kind of tied on this. There were like a couple of people that you'd know, obviously. The guys that actually made DCC were on it. But for the most part, after that, it was a bunch of unknowns. It was people that had no real position in the OSR to speak of. And that's because Goodman Games wouldn't give a platform to most of the people that actually do have cachet in the OSR. They're not going to give it to me. They're not going to give it to Venture Satanis. They're not going to give it to Joe Bittman. They're not going to give it to they're not going to give it to Grim Jim. They're not going to give it to James Raggy, So like, and they probably wouldn't give it to Greg Gillespie, right? Because he made one of the greatest OSR dungeons of all times, but he's kind of conservative, slightly, And they probably wouldn't give it to Griffith Morgan because he spoke to us. So even though he's like the classic aging hippie boomer liberal, like absolute total 60s boomer. I love him to death. He's a really good friend of mine, Griffith Morgan, but he is totally the old hippie boomer liberal, the guy that loved Bill Clinton and stuff like that. The guy probably, his politics might have changed over time, but I'm guessing he might have been the sort of guy to have voted for Mondale. Like who knows? Anyway, the point is, none of these guys would show up. None of the people that have actual talent would show up because they wouldn't be invited, because Goodman has to follow these rules of being part of the woke SR, and they did everything. They tried to follow everything, but of course it's impossible to follow everything. So sooner or later, you are going to be turned on. That's one of the secrets of the system, that at some moment when it's convenient to certain people within the woke OSR, they will declare you the enemy too. So what's the point? You know, like there's no good reason to align yourself in that way. And I think that's mostly what I wanted to say about it, right? It's just it was a stupid thing from the beginning. Goodman Games is not a trustworthy company for, you know, for being anti-woke, you know, like they're not in any way. So, you know, I'm not saying don't play DCC because I recognize I love DCC. I would never buy another DCC product now, but I still own DCC and I've been running it literally for almost 11 years now because it's my Last Sun campaign, right? It's based on DCC. So I can't well tell you not to play it, but I could suggest to you that if you're looking to buy stuff, you should look at third-party products rather than Goodman Game products. For example, World of the Last Sun. Let's see what people are saying about this. Goodman was already woke. Well, yes, that's what I was getting to there. Surly Unicorn says they're changing their name to Good People Games now. Well, I saw one. I think it was somebody sent it to me. That was the Goodman Games logo, except it says Good Ma'am Games logo. Hey, $10 super chat from Space Zeus. Thank you to everybody who super chats. That's wonderful. Space Zeus says, Abby the Bulldog hears your voice and awaits a Meatball appearance in order to wake up the entire neighborhood. Well, Meatball, right now, she's downstairs. I think she's eating. But I'm sure she'll pop up at some point, depending on how long this live stream is. I'm guessing she'll come by sometime fairly soon. Rational Ginger, SJWs. Why do white people keep making such good content? Well, the way, depending on how you phrase that sentence, it could mean different things, right? Like, for example, why, like you might be asking, why is it that white people keep making good content? Or is it like, why do they keep making good content when we don't want good content to be made, right? So it kind of depends. But the one thing for sure is that the first batch of people that were on the Goodman Games Indie Creator Expo list were mostly non-entities that were kind of useless. And the new batch are even worse. They're even worse non-entities. Double D talks about this too, you know. John Eden says, I didn't even know that Harley Strode and Joseph Goodman were white until yesterday. Well, yeah, but there you are. Elle says, diversity crawl classics. Sad Wings Raging says, we need a based games Inc. with Pundit as the CEO. No, not really. I mean, like, at least from my point of view, I'm not a guy, I don't make right-wing games. I don't even make anti-wokeist games. I make games that aren't woke, obviously, right? But that's because normal things aren't woke by definition. And so I make normal games. I make really interesting normal games about stuff like history and sometimes, weird science fantasy. And that's what I think people should do, right? Like, I don't think that the rebuttal to the woke incursion is to create an incursion of being intentionally offensively conservative or something like that, or propagandistically conservative, even less, right? I think that the antidote to it is to take a stance of opposition to woke incursion and to produce games that are aggressively normal and have high quality that people will actually want to play. That's the solution. Make sure that you make the games that are really good, that people want to play, and that they'll play them because they know that they're not going to get some woke crap in it, and those games will sell. And as we've seen, the other types of games increasingly fail to sell. So let me see what else we've got here. Elle says, Tanya DePass's Rivals of Waterdeep is on the D&D TV channel. She said, white men keep ruining D&D. Well, white men created D&D. Yeah, these people are ludicrous. You know, like I saw this thing on Twitter the other day. I just barely scanned over it, but I saw that some other people were commenting on it, where some guy says, you know, as DMs, I think everyone now has a necessary responsibility before starting a game to question to themselves, you know, is this gaming group adequately diverse? You know, is this gaming group um, respectful of anti-colonialist views or stuff like that? You know, like it's just this whole questionnaire of things that a DM should have to ask themselves, right? Because that's necessary. And that's just nonsense. Um, Bo Pink's Mini says the left always eats itself. That's very true. Um, Chris Miller says it wasn't really an indie RPG summit at all. Yeah, I could tell that, right? It was a bunch of DCC employees and 5e fanboys. Yeah, well, I noticed from the list that there were several people there that were past writers for Goodman Games, right? So it was really just them and their buddies, you know. And I don't think that I think that it was mostly nonsense for show, right? They weren't expecting it to actually they probably weren't expecting to make a big deal out of it. They didn't think this was going to be some huge event, you know. They thought it was going to be something that DCC fans would attend to, you know, and then it just went completely out of control for them. Sadwings Raging says, here at Goodman Games, you too can be on the menu to feed our cancel culture crazies. Holy crap, 102 watching. That's awesome. Wonderful. Nice to see everybody here. If this is the first time that you're watching a live stream, welcome. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. And later on, check out all my other videos. And I really appreciate everybody who's coming on to watch. There's a lot of different topics. We were just talking right now at this moment about Goodman Games and their enormous screw up with letting themselves be intimidated by wokeists, but then again, they have been wokeists for a long time themselves, you know. Matthew Sedan says, why is Dungeon Crawl Classics suddenly a bad thing? Well, it's not. The game itself, the core of Dungeon Crawl Classics, the current edition of it, is a masterpiece of OSR design. The problem is that after they made that, the people in charge at Goodman started to become increasingly woke, and that didn't, for a while, it didn't really show in a lot of their products, but it is increasingly showing. And also, I know from stuff like from speaking with Joe Bittman that they were, you know, that they were becoming politically selective in who they had writing for them. You know, so that's not that great, right? At least that's how I understood what he said. You know, it's not a first-hand account, but it's what I've gotten from him, who was once a guy that wrote for Goodman and then now does not anymore. L says Unscripted Unchained said it was an OSR summit. None of them are OSR. Well, they're, you know, some of them are doing. I mean, they've obviously done a lot of DCC stuff in the list of those guys, but which is OSR. But you know, none of them are actually indie creators. Most of those guys are basically freelancers for Goodman Games. You know, and the ones that aren't, none of them was the name of somebody that I said, oh wow, you know, like that's like Kevin Crawford, you know, something like that. Some guy that's actually done games that people know him for making games, right? The only game that anybody there was known for making was Dungeon Crawl Classics. So it was like a house event, you know. And I don't think they were expecting it to become a big deal until the leftists made it a big deal. A lot of people here saying they're waiting for Meatball. Well, you know, Meatball comes at her own time. You cannot force her here. I cannot force her here, you know, and not one can never know when she will appear. Ivalus DS Hunter says, what's your take on IC Iron Crown Enterprise's Rollmaster? I was never a big Rollmaster fan myself. It was way too complex in my view. I never quite understood why anyone liked it. But I did play a little bit of MERPs in the 1980s, which was the Middle Earth role playing, which is basically a simplified version of Rollmaster. And that was, to me, that was a very complex game. I still think, you know, but it was a game that at least there I found that playable. Seafire 2100 says normal games to the woke are right wing and extremist. Yeah, well, they absolutely are, which is going to lead into our next topic of the evening in a second here. because like most people would not think that, for example, Spelljammer was a right-wing extremist product, right? I mean, I think most of us would not think of it that way in any real sense. But apparently, to the D&D wokists, it was, and I'll explain why in a moment. But I want to just get caught up on the comments first here. Chris Miller says, "Not that I care to help DCC, but to play devil's advocate. How does the woke mob know that the entire staff of Goodman doesn't identify as black female lesbians?" That's a good question. I don't know if any of you out there have seen this Daily Wire movie, the one about the basketball team that all decide to identify as women. I have not seen it yet. I'm wondering. I figure some of you might have. Does it suck? Because it's great that they want to own the liberals, but if it's not actually really funny, if it's just propaganda, that's an example of what I'd say not to do, right? If it is funny and it has that message, but it's more about being funny rather than about making the libs mad, or something like that, then that's good, right? But I don't know. I'm just curious. I have not seen it. I just wanted to know if anyone has and what they think of it. Lucas Vera says, "You speak Spanish?" I assume that's a question for me. Yeah, I do. I speak very fluent Spanish. I've been on interviews with Spanish OSR YouTube channels and things like that. And I am a fluently bilingual person. Sad Wings Raging says, "Need a module where your party is going to distant lands to conquer the heathens and bring capitalism to their savage ways." Okay. Let me see here. What other comments have we got? Meatball sightings are rare and precious, says Joseph Casnell. Some new names here, people I haven't seen before. I'm pleased by that. Joseph Casnell says, "Any opinions on Chivalry and Sorcery?" Well, Chivalry and Sorcery is a very old game. And I actually met one of the guys that made it because he lived in the city that I lived in for a long time in Canada. And it's an interesting game, and it's definitely more medieval-ish than Dungeons and Dragons. That was like its selling point, right? But it wasn't really a professional, like, it clearly wasn't done by somebody who was extremely well versed. It was an amateur effort, like an amateur historian's take on it. And in a lot of parts, it wasn't that much. There were parts that weren't as authentic as they could be, obviously, right? And also it was the paradigm of it. There was stuff that there was just levels of research that they didn't have when they did it, right? Also, the mechanics were not, to me, the great. It was very typical, like early on fantasy heartbreaker type mechanics, like D&D but not D&D sort of thing. Anyway. What else have we got here? Chris Miller says, "I met and talked to Joe Goodman a few years ago, bought his game and like 15 adventures, seemed like a great guy. Sad to see him go completely woke. I will not be buying his products in the future." Don Pelayo says, "The trailer to Lady Baller seems like a bad Steven Crowder sketch that goes on way too long." Yeah, I have my doubts. I did see the trailer. I have my doubts about it. So, like, again, my point, we can debate this if you like, but my point is that the answer to overtly woke products is not to make products that are just overtly about pushing a right-wing propaganda message over and above making a good story, making a good game, making a good movie, whatever, right? Like whatever genre we're talking about, it's not about doing something just to piss off the liberals and that's somehow going to make it better. What's better is to make good stuff, good stuff that doesn't cater to wokeness. So What else have we got here? 115 people watching. That's amazing. I don't think Inappropriate Characters ever gets these numbers. So, what the hell? But all right. Warplane says, I think if you want to make 5e OSR, you should restrict features, classes, and other nonsense abilities that won't work for your setting. Just an idea. Well, yes. And I mean, that was part of the idea in 5th edition originally, right? When we made 5th edition, part of the idea was that everything was optional, everything was modular, everything could be changed. And so it would let everybody mold the rules to their specific campaign, to how they wanted to run it. And nobody's done that. Nobody. It was a complete failure in that sense, that we were expecting like 1,000 points of light, and instead everybody just wanted to have the standard rule set, All right. So now that we're caught up, let's go to point number 2 here. So the Neogi. Those of you who are familiar with Spelljammer would know this is an evil race in the Spelljammer, the original Spelljammer setting. And recently I did posting about this on Twitter. I haven't done a video about it, but that's because, I've been doing a lot of different videos right now. But I did do a video a little while ago. In fact, I mentioned in 2 previous videos, relatively recent ones, that WotC is now going around editing and altering the language of the 3 core books and other books based on what their diversity commissars have declared must be removed, right? And one of the things that they had removed, and I did do a video talking about this, is that apparently anything that has to do with slavery has to be removed. And it's not like, it doesn't matter if you're presenting it in a favorable or unfavorable light or what it's about. There's a very famous, this is funny because there's a very famous 1st edition adventure series, a series of modules that was against the slave lords, right? Where you went and fought against slavers. Yeah. That sort of thing, according to the diversity readers, is not allowed because you just can't have it. It's just not right for multiple reasons. And the reasons appear to be because in the first place, it could be triggering to someone that has probably never experienced slavery in any way, but they could be triggering to them anyways. They could claim, their great grandfather was a slave, or maybe their great grandfather was a slave owner, and that triggers them also. I don't know. And so or great grandfather at this point. I mean, it's just a ridiculous argument, right? And then there's the argument that if you have slavery in a setting, then that means you are supporting the idea of slavery, regardless of how you present it. So whether you present it as a terrible thing that must be fought, or as a normal thing that is a product of the culture that you created in the setting, you cannot allow the risk. And basically, this is what it comes down to. This is all a projection of the whole managerial class idea, right? Again, WotC, the corporation, are the managers. They're the ones that need to tell you how your entertainment should go. Because if you are able to define what the conditions of your own entertainment should be, you might do something that they don't think is best for you, right? And so that has to be stopped. So for them, it's just like for the Bro SR, just like for the story gamers, their hierarchy is that the game designers, or in this case, not even the game designers, the corporate supervisors are the people that should be in charge of your game, right? And then below that are the rules, and then below that is like the players' feelings, but also the feelings of people who aren't there at your table, but that are part of the larger community. You might never have them at your table, but because these people exist in your community, they also should get to decide what's in your games, right? And at the lowest point of the whole totem pole is the DM, who should be nothing more than just kind of a facilitator for the whole process. That is what their position is on this. And because of that, their view, the reason that they want to get rid of anything that mentions slavery is that their view is that DMs cannot be trusted to run it correctly. Players cannot be trusted to handle it correctly in the way that they think it should be handled, right? Like, obviously, if the person in charge was somebody who was, I don't know, a woke DM of color of the LGBTQ plus community, they would know how to handle it, right? But because we don't know who's going to get to play, we need to remove these things from the books because the wrong people might play it in the wrong way, you know, and inherent in this is actually the argument that even if you're fighting against slavers, that can be very problematic because there's a very good chance, even though they keep claiming that this has changed, but like you watch the intro to any Diversity and Dragons video, and you can see the people coming into Gen Con are still pretty much all white males, right? So they know there's a very high chance that a lot of people at their table are going to be white and mostly male. And the people at the table, even if those are the people that are fighting against slavery, that sends the wrong message, right? Because obviously white people have to be held responsible for slavery, and the idea that they are fighting against slavery would actually be it's actually a type of paternalism and colonialism, right? And it's actually an aspect of white supremacy, that the idea that they're the ones that fought against slavery. Even if historically that was in fact true, even if it was in fact that the British Empire spent an amount of money that they had to pay off such a huge debt that it wasn't finally paid off until 2014. 200 years it took them to pay off the debt that they incurred in ending the intercontinental slave trade. And even though it's true that hundreds of thousands of Americans died in a civil war to end slavery in America, even though those things are true, they're still problematic because the fundamental part of the narrative that we must now believe is that, white people are responsible for slavery and could never actually be the ones that oppose it or that solve it. At best, what they should be is allies to productive women, people of color, and the LGBTQ plus spectrum that are the ones that are actually fighting against it, right? So having white people play heroes that oppose the slave trade in an RPG is essentially like a lynch mob. That's basically their argument, right? So this leads us to the Neogi. And if you haven't checked this out on my Twitter, you need to take a look. And on this Twitter, you're going to find it eventually. Do a search for Neogi and my name or something like that on Twitter. And what you'll find is that somebody shared with me a picture of the newly edited version of the Neogi from Spelljammer. And essentially what they did is they erased everything that mentioned that they were slavers. And there's like huge sections of like redacted black text there of everything they removed. And this creates a bit of a problem because basically, the Neogi are terrible villains. They're these like inhuman arachnid guys that travel across space in the Spelljammer setting. And they're like the intergalactic slave traders, right? And that's why they're evil. They're also really tough opponents. They have terrible powers and all this. But having redacted all this text, Neogi are still listed as evil, which I'm really surprised, right? Because nowadays, I thought monsters weren't allowed to be evil anymore, but these ones still are. Perhaps just because it's the untold legacy of them having been slavers or something, But the only reason now that you could see for why they're evil, there isn't one, right? It doesn't say. So like it says the Neogi are, powerful opponents. They have, they're vicious and violent, but that isn't evil. That's an animal trait basically. And then it says they have no understanding of human emotion, right? So so someone said, oh, hang on, they must be evil because they're autistic, or something like that, because that's the only thing left. They didn't even replace it with anything because they couldn't. So what they actually do is that they make the monster senseless. It has no purpose now. It's just this thing that floats through space and is bad for reasons no one knows why, And that's what they've done with it. And that's an example that, because some people are saying, well, but this is just about changing the language. It's about altering some language that you can pick other words and it'll mean the same thing. And it doesn't. And in fact, in a lot of cases, it's just about directly erasing things, and it's about erasing anything that is not reflective of a 2023 downtown Seattle value, right? If it is not that like extreme progressive value of the left coast, then you're not allowed to have it in your own game. And that's basically what they're pushing now. And I've been saying that for a long time, right? That all of their settings look the same because all of them have the same social values, and they have no, they don't even want to present anything contrary to that, except for maybe like intolerance in a vague sense, right? That, you know, you could have some white guy be the bad guy or something, but it's just he's bad because he's not diverse enough. And there's no two settings that are going to seem different, right? Like Ravenloft and the Forgotten Realms now are basically the same in 5e, in the 5e woke world, you know, and for that matter, so is Spelljammer, so is Dragonlance. They all have exactly the same feel to them. Radiant Citadel and, you know, the other garbage ones. They're all the same because you're not allowed to have different cultures or societies presented. You're not allowed to have anything based on history. You're not allowed to have anything based on myth. And this is why they're just so incredibly boring and why they're losing so much money now. Anyways, let's see what people have commented. What's wrong with the 5e DMG? I think it's actually incredibly good. It's a great. It's one of the better DMGs in, you know, official D&D. At least until they change the language. Now I can't say about that. I don't know. Where are we here? Chris Miller says, WotC recently announced they will be reprinting the original white box OD&D books. I guarantee they will have the diversity officers comb through it and censor it before it goes up for sale. Yeah, either that or they'll put some kind of disclaimer saying that this is, you know, a horrible white supremacist evil and you shouldn't play it, and yet they're still going to sell it, right? Like, this is the hypocrisy of the woke corporate world. Jeff Hatch says, WotC supports morally decrepit practices from the alphabet community, but not heroes fighting slavery. Correct. Yeah, that's essentially correct. Yes. So, Jeff Hatch says, Chris Miller, not interested. That is in the white book D&D. I owned a version and sold it. There are OSR clones if you want that version of the game. I won't support their shameful cash grab. Yeah, well, people really shouldn't be supporting WotC. I know that, yeah, it's hard for me to tell you, well, don't buy this reproduction of the you know, original box set or something, because I can understand why you would want that. But Osiris isn't wrong. You know, like you when you do this, you're funding them continuing to destroy D&D. You know, so he has a point. What else have we got here? A lot of people talking about. There we go. Matthew Sinan said they censored the official PDF releases of the thing. Yeah, well, from what I understand, is they've altered the language in the virtual text, and it's probably going to be reflected in future printings. And where people have been noticing it have been in like the updates of people on that they have on, what is it, Roll20 or whatever it is, the one that they have, D&D Beyond, right? On D&D Beyond, that certain people have noticed that their PDFs or whatever that they've got stored in the D&D account has been altered without even notifying them. You know, like that the text has changed because they've compared it to earlier versions and they realized they've altered the text. So Osari says, honestly, I think 5e has gotten to the point of 3.5's arms race. I hope they can just flood the market with expansion books so the edition can just die already. Well, the edition is finished now, right? Like they're coming to the end of it, and in 2024, I guess they're going to make the one D&D, and that will be in the VTT, and then we'll see if how that works out for them, and what happens next. But there's a good chance that D&D will become increasingly irrelevant to those of us who actually play tabletop RPGs, because it won't really be that anymore. Chris Miller says we'll find out that the Yogi are all Trump supporters. Mad Maxine, correct, says removing transgressions and conflicts defeats the purpose of the game. Absolutely. But they want a game with no purpose, right? That's part of it. They want the game to be about working at a coffee shop or going to the prom or going to a night market. They don't actually like heroic fantasy. That in itself is a big problematic element, because it encourages all kinds of things that are not the values that they hold, right? It encourages the idea of heroism, the idea of fighting for ideals, the idea that there's right and wrong, that there's truth and falsehood. It encourages the idea of individuals being heroic, right? And not that their solution has to come from some kind of a collective means. There's all kinds of things about the entire model of Dungeons & Dragons as heroic fantasy, which is basically, it marks D&D out as the enemy of wokeism. What else have we got? Emery Calamay says, this is a box of virulent rape culture from the bad times, and WotC might and OTC might blow up in your face like a bomb. Warning on D&D books. Calvin only says, yes, we need re-education for proper gameplay. Don Pelias says, I won't buy old school print-on-demand stuff from Wizards. I'll just stick with retro clones so WotC isn't getting any of my money. Very good. I agree, though. Apart from retro clones, you should definitely check out products that are from sources in the OSR that aren't just retro clones. Like, for example, Lion and Dragon, medieval authentic role-playing. It's like D&D, but, well, it's rules are based on the original game rules, but they have been wildly modified to fit a medieval authentic setting. Be sure to check it out. What else have we got here? Fortunately, I have the white box and the expansions. Spencer Wright said he referred. Oh, this is Matt Colville. He's talking about. He referred to the founding fathers as dead white assholes, among other things. Okay. Joseph Cannell goes, could Elon Musk buy WotC and just agree to make? Well, I don't think Elon's going to be getting WotC. Jager says WotC will D&D will go left until it's as relevant as the new Doctor Who. Jesus Christ, what a disappointment those have been. Although I don't know, I've watched only the first one of those specials, and it was from my point of view, it was the worst episode of Doctor Who of all time, except all three of the last seasons. That is to say, every single one of the post Capaldi. It was the best episode after Capaldi finished. It was the worst episode from Capaldi backwards. So that's because in spite of himself, in spite of how ridiculously woke the episode was, it was still better written than the garbage that Chibnall did with the Doctor in his run. Don Pillai says, I already own Lion and Dragon and both Dark Albion books. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that, Don. It's a great help in these troubled times. If you are to check out my products and pick some of them up, it's a good way to support me and keep me doing the things I'm doing. So I'm very grateful to it. In case any of you haven't seen the video, my latest product to come out now is Heroes and Villains of the Silk Road, which is a collection of biographies and stats for every NPC, historical NPC that appears in the Sword and Caravan book. Plus, it's got the assassin class and a larger timeline of adventure queues for Sword and Caravan campaigning, and it has some new high-tech devices from the Song Dynasty. So there you go. Be sure to check it out. And I'm about to make an announcement today about my next project, the one that I'm working on right now. I'll get to that briefly, but I just want to catch up again here on the comments. Joseph Cannell says Lion and Dragon rocks. Thank you very much. Jeff Hatch says, I have LND. What's a good starting adventure? Well, if you check out I don't have it with me right now, but the Old School Companion 2 has like 24 adventures that are all based on either medieval history or folk tales, or in some cases, well, myths and legends, or even songs, even medieval songs. You know, so and they're all really, really good. You can use them in any OSR setting, but it's certainly good for using with Lion and Dragon. You'd be bound to find that any of those are going to be very different from the typical kind of D&D, let's say like Forgotten Realm or Greyhawk adventures. But you know, I'm sure that you're going to find them well worth it, and almost all of them are kind of sandbox adventures, right? Lion Jacob says my work is over here and I can write here in the chat now. Well, welcome aboard. Sir the Unicorn says Doctor Who, the woman-splaining special. Yeah, really. My goodness. Big Clue says you had me at Dark Albion, LOL. Joseph Cannell says, I really like Green Ronin systems, but are they political also? Let me put it this way. Nicole Lindros of Green Ronin was woke before that was even a word, before SJW was a word, right? Like they were the people. Green Ronin were the ones that kind of invented putting overt left-wing politics into products with no concept of care or neutrality, right? So yes, they are. Green Ronin is extremely hyper politically woke, yeah, and they have been for longer than anyone. I mean, you know, I was fighting them right at the very beginning of my career, and I've been doing this since like 2005. So that tells you, you know, before anybody had even heard the words SJW, much less woke. You know, that's how long I've been doing this, and that's how long she's been doing this. Osiris says the new Critical Role system didn't mention Lovecraft while taking his stuff. Can you believe those guys? Yeah, well, it's really crappy. I don't know who I need to tell this to, but I mean, like, I'm guessing the people are really going to buy that crap game are people who are fans of Critical Role. So I'm guessing most of that isn't the people watching this right now, the 115 of you that are watching right now. But let me just say that, you know, that you should really, if you want a Lovecraft type game, you should not buy that. You know, that, what is it, Camera Obscura or whatever. You should check out. You should also not buy Call of Cthulhu anymore because, you know, it's gone woke. But what you should pick up now is Raiders of Riley, which are Relier, right? Which is by Quentin Bauer. It is an excellent Call of Cthulhu game. It's set in the 1910s. It's got a huge source book that is just amazing, and it's Cthulhu the way you remember it, with slightly more pulpy elements, a little bit more like it's Cthulhu, but your characters aren't expected to be like wimpy university professors that are doomed to die. You know, like they might actually be guys that know how to fight or something. But they don't have to be either, right? You can still play the wimpy university professor if that's what you like, you know. So check out Raiders of Riley. What else have we got here? Casa Goncalves says, good night and shout out to Brazil. Well, good night, Casa. Thank you for that. Joseph Canal says, do you have any plans to create new adventure scenarios for L&D? Well, I do, yes. I mean, for L&D and its associated works. So like besides the adventures that are now already published in the Old School Companion 2, I guess I'll start on this subject here at this moment, is that I'm about to start a new series, by my RPG Pundit Presents series, which is still being published. Like some of them are still being published once every few months by Spectre Press. I've decided to start a new series of short supplements that is going to be called the Pundit Files. Okay, and these are going to be very similar to RPG Pundit Presents, so it'll definitely include adventures. In fact, there is already out of the ones I've been writing, I've already written one adventure for it. And now that adventure is going to be for Lion and Dragon or for any OSR game, but it isn't going to be set in Albion. It's set in actually the setting of Sword and Caravan. So it involves going to a ruined city near the Silk Road. But there will be stuff that will probably be for medieval Europe as well. And don't forget that at the end of the year, I'm coming out with Mad Scribe Games, that is publishing my Baptism of Fire, which is a revised Lion and Dragon rule set, which is not that anything, there's no fundamental rule that's changed. It's just been expanded with some of the material from the other source books, and some of the classes have been altered to fit the setting of Baptism of Fire. It's going to be early medieval, and it's set in PS Poland, at the beginning of its existence, when it was being Christianized. And it's going to be a very interesting book, and I'm sure there'll be therefore adventures in this new series. The Pundit Files will have adventures for Lion and Dragon set in kind of dark Albion England, or set in Sword and Caravan along the Silk Road, whether it's in the Holy Land all the way to China or anywhere in between. And it'll have adventures set in the dark witch-covered forests of Poland. So you'll have some of all of those. But yeah, there'll definitely be stuff like that, and other things, like small source books. Another product, for example, it's going to be in this Pundit Files series is the Medieval City Guide to Baghdad in the 1190s, which is really interesting. But there'll be lots of other stuff too. There's going to be stuff on like lots of random table generators. There's going to be things about like how to shake up your campaign in different ways. There's going to be new character classes, NPC rules for generating NPCs, rules for sieges, lots of other stuff, right? It's all coming along. And well, I'll tell you guys a little more about this just as soon as I catch up here with the comments. You're bound to see that there is a the very interesting bit of news that I have is regarding the Pundit Files product line. But let me just catch up here. Algid Flame says, Pundit, what do you think about the Adventurers Guild trope? Well, I think that's, if you're running a game in like Greyhawk or Blackmoor or the Forgotten Realms, it's whatever, right? It doesn't really matter, right? If you're running a medieval authentic game, it makes no sense at all, right? Like it could make sense to have a mercenary company, but mercenary companies were not adventurers, right? Mercenary companies were groups of soldiers. So that wouldn't really make a lot of sense either. You could have the player characters being a group of bandits, right? To me, the best scenario for like what a group of player characters are is that they're all specialist agents of some patron, for example, or they're all in the service of some lord. But the idea of there being an adventurers guild makes no sense whatsoever in the medieval context. In the medieval context, guilds were city-based monopolies that protected business for a specific type of tradesman or craftsman, right? So the fishmongers had a guild, the jewelers had a guild, the goldsmiths had a guild, the mercers had a guild, the barrel makers had a guild, and only the people who were members of the guild could make and sell those goods inside the city. And that's what a guild was. An adventurers guild makes no sense at all, right? Like what you could have is if you have a setting in the 18th century and up, you can have a club, an adventurer's club, right? Like a gentleman's club, something like that. That would work. But an adventurer's guild in a medieval authentic contest, no. Chris Miller says, if you guys love Spelljammer or Dark Sun, play my game Encore Kingdom of the Gods. Bass Hunter S. Thompson says, show us your favorite pipe. Well, it's hard to say what my absolute favorite pipe is. I have a lot of pipes. There are a lot of pipes that I really love. There are others I love only a little less. There are some that are practical pipes that I take when I want to go somewhere where, if I lose it or break it, it wouldn't matter. Favorite pipe. It's a very tough call because there are several pipes that I really, really enjoy. I guess my recent favorite pipe. Actually, I was wrong. I have two Petersons because I have this one and then the other one, which is the one I was thinking of. But I just got this one about a month or so ago, which is it's a Peterson. It's what you call a virgin pipe. It hasn't been like most pipes have been. They've had like staining done to protect the outer layer. This one is not. This one's just the wood, right? And so when I got it, it was like very beige, and then it gradually darkens as you smoke it in patterns, And anyway, I just quite love this pipe. It's not like any other one I've had before. It's got the military bit of the amber stem, and it's one that I'm quite enjoying right now. But I can't say for sure it's not my favorite. There isn't one favorite pipe of all time for me. I've got a ton of them, and there you go. So if you want to learn more about pipes, I can suggest that you do a search on YouTube, because there's a lot of good channels out there that tell you how to make or how to smoke pipes and things like that. I don't want to turn my channel into one of those. Osiris says, "Hey Pundit, how do I make a proper D&D adventure?" That's a very complex question. I'd probably have to do like a whole video about that. And it also depends on what you mean by a proper D&D adventure. I mean, the simplest D&D adventure you can make is a dungeon, right? Set up a dungeon, try to make that dungeon interesting, and that is easy peasy, right? As long as you can get someone to draw you a nice dungeon map, or you can do it yourself. That's all you need, right? A dungeon crawl. Now, if you want something that is more complex than that, I can't really tell it to you unless I'm willing to spend like an hour and a half here doing it's a good topic to do for a separate video, and maybe I will. But what I'll say for you right now is, read what you think are good adventures, or people that you think have made good adventures. If you want my idea of what good adventures are, I guess check out the Old School Companion 2, where those are adventures. Those are all adventures I've run, right? Like none of them are adventures I just thought up in my head and never did. Like they're all stuff I've actually done. And usually that's an important key, right? Like, because there are guys that publish adventures that they themselves never ran, they never played with anyone, but they just came up in their head and say, hey, that's good, and they do, and that's going to be very different than an adventure that's been kind of tested in the playing, Brother Salt says, Pundit, where can I watch a live play of Lion and Dragon? Well, I'm not sure. I know that one of my players of one of my play tests, he's now running a Sword and Caravan campaign, which runs on Lion and Dragon, if I'm not mistaken. His name's Space Zeus on Twitter, I think. And I often repost his live play of, not live play, but it's pre-recorded, but it's the recording of his game session. So you might check that out to see Lion and Dragon being run, because I don't record any of my Lion and Dragon games. The only games that get recorded that I DM are World of the Last Sun, because Bill the Elf has his YouTube channel. And so if you want to see me DMing World of the Last Sun, which is, well, not see because it's audio only, but if you want to hear me DMing World of the Last Sun, it's pretty hilarious. Especially these last couple of sessions where I've been running one of Venture Satanis's dungeons, very modified, but still it's one of his dungeons from Chult. My players always have a laugh and just cannot understand what's wrong with the man every time I run one of his, but they are fun, right? You got to say that about Venture's products. They're fun. And so is, World of the Last Sun. But yeah, check. Profanarchy and/or Space Zeus is his name, and if you can look him up, if you search through my feed, you'll find me having reposted his live plays of Sword and Caravan at different times, or his video uploads of Sword and Caravan. Anyway, that's the best I can do for you. I don't know anyone else who's recording Lion and Dragon games. So a lot of people tell me they're running them, and that's so great to me. Big Clue says, where's the best place to get your products in hardback, particularly? Chris Miller says all Pundit stuff in hardback can be found in DriveThruRPG. Yeah, I would recommend DriveThruRPG for my print products. I was kind of surprised. I've realized, I didn't realize this until recently, but apparently, because people always say, well, where do you get the best deal? And I always thought that apart from the exclusive ones, like unless you had an exclusive deal with DriveThru, then it did, in which case, that's my Spectre Press products. They only do DriveThru, and so that's the only place you can get them. But all my other books have stuff at DriveThru and at Amazon. And I haven't asked all of my publishers yet, but I had always assumed that the cut was basically the same, whether it was at DriveThru or Amazon. But I've talked to a couple of my publishers now, and a couple of them have said, no, actually, you get more money if it's on DriveThru than if it's on Amazon. And I don't know if that's universal, because maybe some of the publishers have adjusted the pricing for that or something. But I know that that's a fact for some of the products. Like, for example, Lion and Dragon and Dark Albion, the Dom publishing stuff. If part of your concern is that I get the best money for it, is to buy it through DriveThru is better than if I bought it through Amazon, apparently, than if you bought it through Amazon, right? Of course, if you don't care about that, it's okay. You can still buy it from Amazon. I'll understand, and you can always do a super chat here, like that's always another nice way to help out if you want to support the cause. I'm very grateful to everyone who has given me little tips over the years for my entertainment value, such as it is. Now, one thing you notice, I'm not one of these guys that the only way you're going to get your message read is by doing a super chat. Maybe I should be, because maybe I'd make more money that way, but I just can't bring myself to do that. Like, to me, if you do a super chat, it pretty much guarantees that your name, that what you say will be read, unless it's something I'm not allowed to read out loud on YouTube, let's say. But that's not. I'm never only going to read super chats. I can't do that, because I'd rather share the conversation here with everyone and be involved in it with everybody, whether or not they want to give me a tip. Big Clue says, thanks, Big Chris Miller. I want to pick some up this week. His videos have me chomping at the bit to dig into Lion and Dragon and the setting books. Excellent. Well, Chris Miller is the publisher of Sword and Caravan. So if you really want to thank him, pick up Sword and Caravan, which is an excellent product, I must say. I don't have the hardcover up here with me, but here's a soft cover of Sword and Caravan, and it's an incredible book, incredible guidebook. It's got some really awesome maps in there somewhere. There you go, some maps for you. It's just a huge historical resource. When you buy some of my medieval authentic RPGs, you're not just buying an RPG that is totally playable and is focused on playing, but you're also getting like a history education with it. Let me see here. Chico says, we all need to be grateful every day that Wizards doesn't want to update Greathawk, Dark Sun, and Mystara. Damn right. As a Mystara fan, I am. I'm grateful for that. Like it's so horrible, everything they've done with the ones they have updated. I feel so bad for Dragonlance fans and for Ravenloft fans, Al says, Ferris Bueller's homeroom teacher has more charisma than Double D as a DM. Wow. I dread to think what Elle would think of my DMing style. I don't know if he's ever watched any of Bill the Elf's videos, but Joseph Cannell says, I wish I could find a Lion and Dragon group. Well, I wish you could too. You should ask around about somebody running it, you know. Check, is anyone here running Lion and Dragon or wants to run Lion and Dragon? And, you know, maybe some of you can all get together right now in the chat and agree to get in touch with each other about running Lion and Dragon or playing it. Jeff Hatch says, good night, folks. Thank you, Jeff. Chris Miller says, Amazon requires me to give stores a 50% discount and pay for shipping. Then I have to split profits with Amazon. I make like $2 on a $30 sale. So there you go. So that Chris Miller is confirming that Amazon is worse than drive-through in terms of what its benefit to writers and publishers. Bo Paint Spinny says, Invisible College is the one I'm reading right now. Anxious to add elements of it to my sci-fi game. That sounds awesome. Sci-fi Invisible College, absolutely. Celia Incar says, I have Sword and Caravan too, a good read and great art style. Elle says, I forget to look for Bill's channel. Can you make a community post to link it to but I'm not sure if I want to now. But it's Bill the Elf's channel. That's all. That's what it's called. And I do share it on my Twitter, right? So whenever he uploads another recording of our DCC game, I put it up on the Twitter. Steambub says, how does it feel having the first libertarian president in the modern world? Well, I think you're probably talking about Javier Milei, which is not my president. I'm not from Argentina, or in Argentina. The president of the country in which I live is Lacalle, Luis Lacalle Pou, who is conservative. He is a guy. He's one of a very tiny handful of heads of states that refused to lock down during COVID. So he's a goddamn hero. You know, thanks to him, the economy here is stable and doing quite well. He's made a few reforms that are very good, but he is a lot less bold, let's say, than Milei, right? Like he's conservative, and he's strong on civil liberties, which is why he didn't lock down. So I have, you know, he's definitely the best president of Uruguay I've ever seen, right? But he's not a guy that is like a revolutionary at the level of, say, Milei or Bukele or something like that, you know. But yeah, he's another. It's interesting how much of the Latino world is now shifting towards this strong conservative right that hasn't been around, you know, it hasn't been seen in ages. Yeah, it's quite interesting. All right, so getting to my big reveal, and then after that I have one more topic to cover, which is to say the XP wars. But I guess now is the moment. We've got 113 people still watching, so I better tell you guys. So the Pundit Files. The Pundit Files is going to be a product line of short supplements that are going to be coming out once every 2 weeks. It was originally my plan to make these and offer them on one of the drive-through alternatives. So like either Big Geek Emporium or Giant Slayer Games. And it's you know, it's going to be PDF only, at least until I make enough to make like a compilation book or something. But I got in touch with both of them. And both of them were kind of out to lunch. Like, I'm sorry to say, I know that there's some of you that really like them, but Big Geek Emporium didn't get back to me for weeks. By the time they did, I was already talking to Giant Slayer instead. With Giant Slayer, I was talking to them about it, and there was a lot of conversation going on, but they were always kind of putting it off, and then I had to get back to them, and then they'd say something else, and like it was just this back and forth that was it was going nowhere, right? So finally I got tired of that too, and I said, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. I could just put this out on drive-through somewhere, right? But I didn't really want to do that because the whole point of it was specifically to to have it somewhere other than that for the people that, for example, don't like buying from drive-through. And then I decide, well, why did I want to do this? Okay, because I wanted to support some of the people I like who are in conflict, let's say, with DTRPG, and I wanted to give that option for people who want to get my products, right? And so I thought about this. I said, well, really what this is about is the Red Room, right? Like the Red Room are the ones that are my friends, right? We have a very good relationship with them, contrary to what some people like to imagine, what some stupid people like to imagine, right? Where, they've guest starred on my show, that I've guest starred on theirs. We have this really, mutual admiration. They send me their books to review. I retweet them on Twitter all the time. And so then I said, well, hang on, the Red Room has a store. So I contacted them. I said, hey, would you guys like me to do a series and sell it at your store? And of course they're like, oh my God, yes. Like they said, they were very, very happy. Let's put it this way, right? They were very ecstatic at the thought, because obviously some people are going to go to pick up my books from their store, and then they're going to see the other stuff they have at their store, so this is a good deal for them, but it's a good deal for me too, and it's I figured that this is a good way to handle it, right? Because I don't plan to do anything else about like I've got a ton of products on drive-through, and as I just pointed out, they are actually better for the small press publisher than publishing on Amazon, and I'm very happy in general, there, of course, I've got my complaints about some of their policies, but I'm very happy in general with having my books there, and with their business. They certainly, even though they're not perfect, they certainly have more business professionalism in dealing with issues than these other companies have that are very fly by night right now, and that just haven't got it together enough. They're going to really have to get it together in terms of professionalism towards their clients, because their clients are the publishers that want to publish stuff with them. And when you make it too hard to publish stuff with them, people aren't going to publish with them. So Drive-Thru is a company that I'm going to keep making books with publishers that publish there. I don't actually publish anywhere, right? I'm not publishing with the Red Room either, because I'm going to use a publisher that will put it together for me, right? But I'll use publishers that publish wherever they do, right? And it depends. That's not usually the main thing I use as a category, though I do think most of my bigger name publishers have to publish on Drive-Thru, because that's really where the money is. So that's going to keep happening. But I am also going to have this, which is a smaller, it's more niche. It's more like what you get from the Pundit files, like you did from RPG Pundit Presents, are products that come out every 2 weeks, and they range in size from maybe as little as 5 or 6 pages to as many as maybe 20. And they have all kinds of a variety of different stuff. It's like getting a newsletter, right? Where each time you're getting something new that you can use in your OSR gaming. And so the idea originally was that I was going to try to do it as a subscription service, which is one of the things I was negotiating with Giant Slayer. That didn't work out for me in this case. I still think that's not a bad idea for someone to bring up as a way to specifically to offer that type of subscription service without having to be like on Patreon or something, which I also thought, well, maybe I'll do it on Patreon, but I don't really want to do it on Patreon. So instead, I went and I'm going to do it with Red Room, and instead of doing it via subscription service, I'm simply going to put out the issues every week, and hopefully you guys will check them out, and hopefully you'll buy them. If you want to support me, if you want to support the Red Room, if you want to if you want to make sure that independent OSR producers are, being able to make a living, and that's a good way to do it. Another good way is super chats. I welcome all super chats now that I can receive them. So questions. Where is this? The Duck That Sits says, what's the status on the historical RPG set in Dark Ages Poland that you're working on? Excited to get it. That's Baptism of Fire, and I see that Chris Miller already answered. He said he's working on it, waiting on art right now. Okay. So Chris Miller says the Red Room is great at cranking out lots of products in a short time. That's true. L says our Pundit files are print product. No, they're going to be PDF only. Though eventually at some point, if I, I ended up doing like 110 RPG Pundit Presents issues. If I end up doing 25 or 30 Pundit files, then I might put them together in a compilation volume, right? Or if I do 50, I might put half of those in a compilation volume and then half of them in another one. You said L says Pundit files would work great on Big Geek Emporium. Well, I told you I tried to contact Big Geek Emporium. They were just out to lunch for weeks, and then they got back to me. By the time I got back to me, I was talking with Giant Slayer, so I said sorry, and then Giant Slayer took forever to get back to me. And, that's how it went. I'm sorry to say. I had every intention of working with one or the other, and it didn't turn out. So I'll just work with the Red Room, who immediately got back to me and were very professional about it, and we're obviously really excited. Because obviously I think it's fair to say, even though Red Room have had catastrophic, an enormous rise, which has also been a kind of catastrophic rise in the OSR in terms of their personal issues that they faced, but in terms of their popularity and name recognition, they've risen super fast. It's still fair to say that I've got more name recognition than they do, and so they realized instantly something that apparently those other guys didn't, which is that having me on sale in their store is going to draw people in just because it's my stuff, which is a big advantage. Sorry says, so Bunny, can you tell us how to make a supplement book? But it depends on what the supplement is. That's a very generic kind of question, I'm not sure how to address that. Al says, Joe's a mailman, Randy's a high school teacher. I'm assuming those are BGE and Giant Slayer. They're boomers with day jobs, but they only take 5%. Yeah, I know. I recognize that. I get you. But the problem is I'm a full-time game designer, right? So I need to be able to get my stuff out and be certain that it's that I can count on it, that it'll happen in timeliness. And so if even the negotiation part can't be timely and counted upon, that instantly tells me, okay, well, sorry, this is not the right fit for me. I'm not saying that nobody should go buy them. I'm not saying anyone should boycott them. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying that it didn't work out for me with them. So I'm going with the Red Room. Big Clue says it's a meatball catastrophic rise. All right. So yeah, that's the story. So keep an eye out for the Pundit files. I really hope you guys will check out these products. I'll obviously be promoting them and promoting the Red Room's store at the same time. So that's nice. And you never know where that'll go. Okay. So on to the final topic that I had ready for the evening. So hello, Greg Guiliarte, who just said hello. So on Twitter these last few days, there has been a big argument about experience points, and apparently there's some people who have I can't say for sure. The first one that I saw, though, the beginning, as far as I could plot it, was somebody saying that XP for gold, like the traditional experience point system, is the only right way to do D&D, and that like doing milestone XP is just horrifically worse and wrong, and it doesn't work or whatever. I will acknowledge that it's possible that there's something I didn't see, especially if it was from one of the various accounts of, kind of lefty people that block me. That maybe somebody originally did. No, milestone XP is way better than the traditional methods, right? So it's possible that that was there, but that's not the first one I saw. The first one I saw was somebody trying to claim that the only way to do XP right in D&D is XP for gold, right? And that's funny. And I'm going to give you guys my opinion for it, but just a second here, because Laranjico said, are there any plans to make a supplement for Lion and Dragon portraying Northern or Eastern Europe in the Sword and Caravan style? Well, Baptism of Fire will be portraying Poland in early medieval Poland, like the very earliest part of the Middle Ages. So there'll be that, because Baptism of Fire will be a combination. It'll be a rule set, which will be the expanded version of Lion and Dragon, and it will be a complete setting, right? That'll have a gazetteer, just like Sword and Caravan and Dark Albion. It'll have maps. It'll have adventures queues. It'll have lots of random tables for generating adventures. It'll tell you all about society and culture and everything else, right? So there's that. Aside from that, at the moment, I don't have another thing planned, but I'm sure that something might come up. All right, so E. Clark says, wait, XP or GP is a legitimate argument? Who gives a rat ass? You do you. Whatever works at your table works at your table. And someone, Jerry Harris says, XP is racist and just another scheme of patriarchal oppression. Spencer Wright says, I'm too lazy to do XP in my old age. Osiris says, milestone sucks. My DM kept forgetting when to give us any sense of progression and has his advancement be arbitrary. Well, that is a potential problem with milestone XP. You're right. So fundamentally, the argument is, for those of you who, in case somebody doesn't know, milestone XP, it just means that basically the DM decides that people level up at a certain point in time when they feel like it's the right moment for them to level up, right? Like usually maybe at the end of a quest or something like that. And so it becomes entirely kind of arbitrary to the DM in a way. Now, I know that the majority of the OSR is going to come down on this subject, saying, no, it has to be the traditional way. I understand that that's going to be the majority perspective. But first of all, though, which traditional way are you talking about? Because we know it's experience points and that you have to get a certain number of experience points to level up, but obviously every edition of TSR D&D has had a different set of experience point strata, right? Like the amount of XP you need to get to, say, level 5 for a fighter is going to be different in pretty much every edition. And also it's had different ways of counting XP. Because, for example, in AD&D first edition, you end up getting XP for fighting monsters, and you get XP for gold. In Moldvay basic D&D, you get XP for fighting monsters and you get XP for gold. But the way you get them in both of those are different, right? The calculation for monster XP is different from the in AD&D first edition versus Moldvay. The calculation for gold is different. In Moldvay, it's one gold piece is one experience point, period, right? In AD&D, there's all this other stuff that is conditional to it, right? It's not one for one. So there are obviously different variations and different systems. Now, they both agree on certain things, but then there's also other stuff that's added on to it, Magic items give you experience points in AD&D. I believe that they don't in Moldvay Basic, right? I don't think you get XP for magic items. if I remember correctly. I might be wrong about that, but I think that's the case there. So my position, which is contrarian in this case, it's the minority vote, is that actually what type of experience you use should depend entirely on the game you are running and the setting that you are running. Okay, so if you're running a standard, generic fantasy, if you're running Greyhawk or Blackmoor or Mystara that were all created with that D&D system in mind, then yes, that is perfectly good way to do it, using whether it's, in Mystara's case, it would be basic expert D&D, and Greyhawk, it would be either original D&D or AD&D first edition. That would be the way to run it, but if you're running something different, there may be a lot of cases where it won't make sense. The reason it makes sense for those settings is that those settings assume that there are adventurers in the classic style, the D&D classic style, in all three of them. Like all of them having, which ones did I say? Greyhawk, Mystara, Blackmoor. They all have the idea that there are people out there that call themselves adventurers and go out on adventures. And those people collect treasures and gold and kill monsters, and then they come back and they become more powerful, right? So all of that is a standard thing in the game, to the point that Mystara, one of the reasons I love Mystara is that it essentially makes that a real essential part of the setting. Right? Like in the Kingdom of Karamakos, young people are expected to go out and be adventurers, like it's a profession, and in another part, you have to have been an adventurer to be a king. In Urendi, I think you have to be an adventurer to have been a king, right? So these are like literal things. Now, if you're running a different kind of setting, it might not make any sense at all. Certainly in my games, for the most part, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to make those the standards, right? In Lion and Dragon, if you've got XP for gold and XP for killing monsters, it makes very little sense, because monsters are these creatures of myth and legend that are found in the Borderlands, and of course some people might go out to hunt them and what have you, but that's not a profession as such. And as far as gold is concerned, like you look at the social context of the world, right? So in the social context of the world of Greyhawk, it's totally normal that you kill a bunch of brigands and then you literally steal the boots from their feet if those boots happen to be elven boots, or you take the money off of their corpses, and it wouldn't matter which character it is, right? Like, they're all that it's okay for any of them to do that. In Lion and Dragon, it just isn't that way, right? Anybody from the knightly class upwards isn't supposed to care about money, right? They're certainly not supposed to care about money to the point of publicly in front of other people robbing a corpse. I mean, if you're running Arrows of Indra, forget Lion and Dragon. Look at Arrows of Indra. If you run Arrows of Indra, if you're any caste other than an untouchable, you're not allowed to touch a dead body. You need the untouchable to do it for you, right? You shouldn't even be touching it. So like that setting is completely different, right? And so like, holy men certainly wouldn't desecrate a corpse in either Arrows of Indra or Lion and Dragon. They might understand that their fellows are going to take treasure, right? It's the peasants are, right? And then the knight might say, well, I'm going to reclaim this for, because this is obviously too rich for your blood poors, or something like that. And then everybody will have to do what the noble says anyways, right? Because he's the guy in charge, just because he was born noble. That's a medieval authentic setting. And in a medieval authentic setting, making those the standards for XP just doesn't fit. Now, on the other hand, I recognize completely that argument against, milestone XP. But just a second, because we've gotten a super chat. Thank you so much, The Dark Mist, sent a $5 super chat. I'm so grateful to you and to everybody who wants to give me a little tip here for my hard work fighting the good fight as the final boss. And he asked, what was the rule set called for adventurers being part of society? Well, that's the Mystara setting. And specifically, if you read the Gazetteer books of the Mystara setting, which came out in the 80s, right? This was back in the 1980s. I don't know how old you are, Dark Mist, but there was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and then there was what was called Basic Expert Dungeons and Dragons. There were two different rule sets. One was a lot simpler than the other, even though eventually it became very complex on its own with the advancements that were put into it. And it was a very different type of game, and it's for some people a more exciting one. But they also had different settings. The default settings of AD&D at that time would have been like Greyhawk and the Forgotten Realms and Dragonlance. The default setting of basic expert D&D was originally called the Known World, and eventually got that known world was named as a planet, Mystara. And in the Mystara setting, which is a wonderful, slightly gonzo patchwork quilt setting that has like every trope imaginable under it. And they did this whole series of setting books called the Gazetteers. And the Gazetteer series is some of the best setting material that I've ever seen done in any official D&D for sure, and probably in general. It was a huge I was a huge fan of them, of all the Gazetteers, pretty much. There were some that were a lot better than others, but they were all really great. And part of the elements of the Mystara setting, why it worked so well with basic expert D&D, is that it took directly account for some of the mechanics of the game system and turned them into parts of the setting, which is kind of what I've done in like World of the Last Sun with the DCC rules. So one of the elements of the DCC rules is that if you're a cleric or a wizard, your magic can go horribly wrong, right? And so I integrated that into the setting of World of the Last Sun by saying that in the World of the Last Sun, magic is actually a type of like high-level manipulation of invisible nanites that are in the atmosphere. It's actually super high technology that's indistinguishable from magic. But the people that are there after the great disaster in the World of the Last Sun don't really know how it works. They're like a cargo cult, right? So their use of it is potentially flawed. And clerical magic, I decided, well, how does this work? Because a cleric can be doing everything is right, following his god, following all the rules. But if he rolls a natural one, or sometimes even higher, depending on how far he's how many times he's failed before, he can end up being punished by God, even if he's using that spell for something that is absolutely within the interest of what that God would want. So I said, okay, so in World of the Last Sun, there's only one God. He's a computer, and he's gone insane. So he's basically nuts. And so it means that actually the deity disapproval of DCC is just like computer error that is sending you this negative result. You know, that clerics, again, because they're a post-apocalyptic world, most clerics, unless they've gotten really high level and realized the horrifying truth, most clerics think it's that, you know, God is mysteriously disapproving for reasons they can't understand, you know. So building in those mechanical parts into the setting makes the mechanics make sense in the setting. And Mystara did that perfectly with the basic expert companion D&D sets. You know, so that's why it was so good. And part of what they did with that is that they said, well, okay, most player characters are adventurers, right? And so obviously in this society, adventurers are a real thing. People call themselves adventurers. They go in adventuring parties. They do adventurer stuff. And there are certain kingdoms like Karamakos and Urendi that are based on adventurers, and where adventurers are, in some cases, the ruling class and stuff like that, you know. So it was really cool. All right, so I hope that answered your question. Thank you again for the super chat. Getting back to XP. So I agree that milestone XP can have a lot of problems. One of them is that the DM doesn't know necessarily when to do it or not, that it's very arbitrary, it's very Mother May I, and what have you. That's why, for example, in Lion and Dragon, I don't have an arbitrary system. There's a third way here, people. Those of you who've played Lion and Dragon know that Lion and Dragon does not use the standard D&D experience system. Instead, every time you complete a game session, if you've been in the game session, you get 1 XP. And after you get a certain number of XP, you'll level up. And so it's not milestone, because it's not just up to the DM to decide what qualifies. So the DM can do certain things. He can give you extra XP for completing a quest if he thinks so. Or, you know, there can also be like, you can decide kind of a vote for best role player and give that guy an extra XP if you want to, right? But there is, in fact, a structured system where the basic part is that everybody's going to get 1 XP for every session they run. And what that does in a system like Lion and Dragon, people might say, oh yeah, but then what would be even the point, dude, of going out adventuring and killing things and getting gold? Well, killing things and getting gold. Like in the case of Lion and Dragon, why would you go and kill things? Well, if you're fighting evil, you would go and kill things, right? If you're in a war, you'll go and kill things. If you're a cleric and you've been told that there's the Walking Dead, you have to go and kill them, even if they kill you, right? And that should be your only motivation, not the XP, right? And why would you get gold? Well, because it's freaking gold, right? Why wouldn't you? Of course you're going to do that. All right. So the point of it is, instead of forcing a character to suddenly act against what should be the way he role plays, against his character's personality or his social class, just because he needs to get those experience points, you essentially are saying, okay, look, you role play your guy. You don't have to worry about what gets you XP, because what gets you XP is just being in the game. And I've also heard some people say, well, that means there's some people that just aren't going to role play. What kind of players do you have that just don't role play? I know some players that role play less than others. I know some that are absolute goddamn hams that want to like take the air out of every scene, right? That need to be involved in every moment and show off their character in every second. And then I also know a lot of players who are mostly not all that interested in role playing. They want to like, go get to the fighting, right? Or they want to, use their powers or something like that. And they don't really want to spend a lot of time in their, like playing out their characters. So their characters are usually like kind of the strong silent types, right? And either of those are fine. Those are real things. They're both role playing. They're role playing in different ways. One is hamming it up, and the other one is kind of keeping quiet and then gets excited when there's a fight. And that's fine. So, like, if you really got someone who's like, well, if I don't get XP, I'm not going to do anything. Like, what the hell kind of player is that? What are you doing with that guy? Like, why is he even at your table? So my perspective is that really the idea that XP gain has to be a reward for players and a motivation for players to do stuff, I think that's kind of flawed. I think XP, what it should do, if anything, is reflect what you want your game to do, right? So if you want in your game for people to be very inclined to make their top priority to obtain gold pieces, then give XP for gold pieces, right? If that's something that you think is really important that it happens in your campaign, that they get gold pieces for some reason, then tie gold pieces to XP, sure, right? If you think it's really important that they do good deeds, then they should get XP for doing good deeds, right? If you think that's important for them to, well, I mean, look at in the Red Room's products, right? Because all the Red Room is kind of like it's spaghetti punk is what I call it, right? So it's like these like the spaghetti westerns where everybody's kind of a questionable moral character, a kind of scuzzy guy, right? So they give XP in their games for bad behavior. So if you betray someone, if you steal from someone, if you lie to someone, you get experience points. Okay, so that's another way to do it, right? That encourages people to be bastards. And if that's what you want them to be, then do that, right? So, it depends on what you want. And if what you want is for them to just reflect the world, then make sure they know how you're supposed to behave in the world, and then open it up for them to do it in whatever way they want to. And the way to do that is to connect XP not to certain actions, but to just showing up and doing an adequate job of being in the party, and yes, I mean, some people do more and some people do less. It doesn't really matter. If they're having fun, that it doesn't really matter. It matters if they're not having fun. If there's some guy that's really quiet because he doesn't know how to role play or something, and that's a whole other story. But that won't be fixed by giving him an XP for a gold piece, right? That doesn't change anything. So, but if a person, if one person's having fun by going into overdrive with role playing, and another person is not going to do that, they wouldn't have fun doing that, then why are you trying to force them to anyway, right? L says you get XP for magic in mold bay if you sell the magic item to convert to GP, right? But that's not how it works in first edition. In first edition, you got XP just for finding and for keeping a magic item, right? So let me see here what other people have been saying. Now I've lost my place. Okay, Osiris says milestone sucks. The DM forgets when to give us any sense of progression. L says, I like it XP for GP as explained in multiplayer, but the one EDMG, as someone reviewed in full, it makes a lot more sense. Will says, is that Balkan Sobrani? It'll put hair on your chest. No, I love Balkan Sobrani, but Balkan Sobrani is not available around here. But this is Balkan Flake by Gawith and Hogger. Don Pelias says, L&D Fogland sourcebook when? No, nothing planned at the moment. Lix Universe says, XP for gold, I think, is good if the game is about characters being treasure hunters, basically dungeon crawling, but it's a very specific. Yes. Some rando says, LNG French Wars of the Religion would be interesting. That could be interesting, yes. Wolf of Magdeburg says, Milestone is awesome. Marshall Miller says, destroy magic items for experience, baby, lol. E. Clark says, I saw Pundit weigh on it, also many others. Like Pundit says, how you reward XP influences how your players play. And first edition was about going into the dungeon, so GP was an incentive to risk life. Yes, that's true. And I mean, note that if you get more experience for getting gold pieces than for fighting monsters, then the motivation there is to potentially move you away from fighting monsters. So to like find clever ways to get the gold without necessarily having to risk your life fighting the monsters. On the other hand, if you get more XP for fighting monsters than for getting gold, it's the opposite, right? Because there, you're going to really want to fight the monsters to get the XP, whether or not they have gold. Lion Jackal says, I prefer XP for overcoming challenges. I find it interesting that way. Chthonic Musing says XP bonuses for high attributes always seemed odd to me. I think it was part of the reward system. I mean, it's like saying, well, you know, somebody who's more naturally talented is going to progress faster in a course of study, you know. Lictionary says XP per gold makes sense more in that context. It takes into account the journey to get the gold, just as killing monsters provides XP. It serves to count what deserves XP to be awarded for. Yeah. Sean Silly says, what's your take if we don't care about tallying experience points to level up? Well, I mean, I vastly simplified experience points for that reason. I mean, you need to have complex numbers of experience points if you're collecting experience points at a rate of 1, right? Like, so like if one gold piece is 1 experience point, then obviously you got to figure out, well, how many gold pieces does a person need to get to level 2? And that's going to be 1,000 or more, right? So obviously you need to have these big numbers and variable XP values in it. Now, if you're not doing that, if you're doing XP just for showing up, then it's a lot less, right? But what you want to have is just kind of an arithmetically growing scale that says, you know, every so many experience points, and at a low level you want to start it so that only a few experience points are enough to level you up, and then later it becomes a little bigger, and eventually it becomes much bigger as you get closer to the top, so that it takes a lot longer to level up, right? Now, can a DM do all that without ever looking at the XP table? Well, sure, if they're good enough, they can, right? But as somebody pointed out, sometimes what happens there is that DMs might, you know, I think a lot of DMs can use a framework of judging how much time they should go by before leveling people up, right? Let me see what else we've got here. Clark says, bing, 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 Pundit just nailed it. Give XP the way it fits in your game and setting. Besides, we all know XP are just a remnant of whiteness and colonialism, so lean in. Jerry Harris says, in the Norse world, Viking was a seasonal profession. Yeah, but Vikings were raiders. They weren't adventurers exactly. They didn't go out, you know, looking to hunt monsters and do good deeds. They were going out looking to plunder monasteries, you know. What else have we got here? Oh, geez. I've got a lot of catching up to do. including, I think, another super chat, don't I? Yeah, the Dark Mist again, another $5. Thank you so much. Oh, it's one of my players. It's the guy that plays Murshid in my Sword and Caravan game. All right. Says, I completely agree with your point. It's a much better game when you don't focus so much on XP and leveling. Great game so far. So that the Dark Mist is one of the players of my Sword and Caravan campaign. And obviously that's a campaign where we do not use any like value other than, it's the Lion and Dragon standard. It's like you get XP for sessions you show up to, and that's it, and that means the player characters are free to do whatever they want to during a session, because why the hell shouldn't they? And so this is a group that also, it's a very carefully curated group of guys that are really going to be into this kind of campaign, right? So there's a lot of it's a picaresque campaign, so there's a lot of traveling, there's a lot of interacting with people in a society. There are entire sessions that go by without a fight, but they still get XP for it because they do other stuff. They engage in all kinds of other activities, and then there's some sessions where they suddenly decide to go out and have like a massive like classic type of adventure, right? Or a big city adventure. At one point, they got caught up in this gang war in the bad part of Baghdad, right? It was just fantastic, So there's sessions where there can be tons of action and adventure, and sessions where it can be not about that, and that works really good for a travel log type of campaign, like the Silk Road campaign could tend to be. I mean, a Silk Road campaign doesn't have to be that, but that's one of the many possibilities of what it can be, right? All right, what else have we got here? Sean Silly says, can you tell a story about learning to temper differences in personality and worldview from merit, respect for product, and shop talk camaraderie? What the hell kind of question is that? I don't know if this is like yeah, I'm not too sure how like, is that a reference to something? I might be missing something here. Quantifel says Mystara was the best setting. Well, Mystara was my favorite TSR setting. I will say that much. BioKiddo says, what the fuck, medieval authentic, also go kill the undead. Well, everybody in the medieval world knew that there were living dead. They all knew it. It was something that was very well known to everybody. The risk of the dead rising again as monsters, or of ghosts, things like that. Those were all something that was very common in the medieval haunted world, and everybody understood that the way that you believe that there are viruses, right? That viruses are a real thing, then that viruses can kill you, right? What else are we on about here? Are you saying that gold is more valuable than orc lives? Yes, Chris Miller. Elle says, Pundit, be careful. You're going genre on roleplay. Roleplay is not only first-person improv acting. No, it's not. It's actually, role-playing is not about acting at all. It's about immersing into a character. And when you immerse into a character, the goal eventually is that you're not acting at all. It's just the character. You now know what that character does and how they act and think, without having to play pretend about it. Licks Universe says, what do you think about classes having different thresholds to level up? Again, it makes sense in some systems. In others, it doesn't. In systems where there are differences in the power level of character classes, that can make a lot of sense, right? In systems where it's assumed that character classes can be of unequal power level, it sort of makes sense, you know. Like, now if you have a system where the game is set up so that in theory every class will be exactly the same level of ability. Now that's bullshit in game design, right? You can't really do that. But let's say somebody wanted to do that, then obviously everybody would use the same experience thresholds. In Lion and Dragon, though, like for example, in all of my games, I don't worry about balance between classes. What I worry is about niche protection and that each class be the best at the thing it's supposed to be doing. And what that means is that there are certain classes that are going to be much more powerful at doing some things versus others, right? In a melee fight, nobody will beat the fighter in Lion and Dragon, right? And that's very important. But in other stuff, there's stuff that, like, I mean, how the hell do you even judge what a Magister is good or not at? You know, like, because they're not like D&D wizards either, right? So Magisters at low level are basically just really well-educated guys that can potentially do some magic if you give them enough time and opportunity, right? And then at like the worst case, like that when they get higher level, they're just capable of incredible feats of magic, right? But again, they're going to get their ass kicked in a melee fight, you know. Sad Rings Raging just gave us a super chat. Thank you very much. $10 super chat. I really appreciate it. He says the word Viking is a verb, an action in the Norse language. That's right. It's to go Viking. That's what it meant. You went Viking when you were going to go and raid. You know, it is a noun to us though now. More meatball head scritches. I will give her head scritches as soon as she chooses to arrive. So what else have we got to say here? Sebastian says, can you say Inye for $900? I can say Inye. I'm waiting for those $900, Sebastian. And they better not be Argentinian pesos. That was the way it was in first edition, different XP targets, and I liked it just fine. Sean Sley says, do you care to say something about those of us fantasy RPG aficionados who are mostly solo collector players producing material, want a social life, but not much of a group participant? Well, I don't know what you want me to say to you, Sean, but you know, I'm very happy for anybody who buys my products, right? If you want to buy my games even though you're not going to play, I'm grateful for you buying my games. I'm a little sad that you're not going to get to play them, you know. I would say, especially in this day and age where you can find groups, and you can get together a group online, you know, and run a game or play in a game. It's well worth doing it, you know. But you know, I'm not going to condemn you for not playing my games after you bought them, right? And of course, some of my games, like, you know, Heroes and Villains is basically a history textbook, right? It's like if you enjoy reading about the biographies of insane medieval people, you know, Heroes and Villains is a great book to pick up, even if you're not gonna, even if you think you're not gonna use it. But I mean, then again, since there's a few of them that are famous in there, but most of them aren't really famous to anyone who isn't a medieval historian. There's a lot of characters that you could drop into any number of other settings, and they would be like, and they, you know, these are all larger than life people. It seems like that was a time when everybody in important positions on the Silk Road was a larger than life character. So yeah, so you can read my stuff. I hope you find a way to play. E. Clark says, thieves lived hard, leveled up fast, and died young. That was the way it was, and we liked it. What else now? XP are just midi-chlorians, says Chris Miller. Al says, XP as a play style gate is silly. Optional rule says, gold as XP becomes interesting if there are multiple ways to advance, i.e. magic items, followers, points, etc. in addition to the level. Yeah, you can do it that way. Again, everything you do then makes that an incentive for player characters to do it, right? So if that's what you want, if you want the player characters to have that incentive, then great, right? But you better think it through of exactly what you want, right? Because it'll mean that some characters will end up going against what their character's natural inclination would do for the meta reason of getting experience points, right? Potentially, it can create that situation. In some cases worse than others, because I mean, part of the problem is that some people might create characters that do not fit that setting, right? And then you've got a huge problem, right? And then kind of the default D&D dungeon crawl, it's like if you have a character who's like a guy who doesn't want to go adventuring, what the hell are you doing with that character? Like, why are you allowing the player to even play that, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you remove the idea that XP has to be predicated on certain specific behaviors, then suddenly everybody can play the type of character the way they want to play it. And you just have, then the XP is just based on actually playing their character whatever way they choose to play it. And I think that's usually the better way. Oh, ho, ho. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Meatball. Here's some head squitches for her. Oh, she's not happy about being lifted up. I'm sorry, Meatball. I'm sorry, but the people want to see you. You don't know how much they love you. You have no idea how much they demand to bask in your presence. Here's her tail, anyway. Yeah, Meatball's on my lap now, and all is good with the world. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I had to lift you up there, Meatball. All right, so what else were we saying here? Steambub says, yeah, the Star Adventure XP system heavily reminded me of GURPS, but without the point buy. Yeah, also, in other words, it reminded you of GURPS without the thing that makes GURPS suck. Marshall Miller says, I do combat experience plus some for exploration, finding lost tombs, obtaining artifacts, and social accomplishments, making allies, destroying enemies. Seems to work well. Yeah, I mean, that can work well, again, right? As long as you make sure that the stuff you're encouraging is stuff that is what you want more of in the game, and that you maintain consistent standards for those things, right? Because if you give people XP for making allies, then they're going to want to go make more allies, and then you need to give them the same XP for making allies, or else there's going to be a problem, because then it's suddenly just a Mother May I situation, right? My version of it, rather than the standard concept of the milestone or the that sort of thing, is that it stops being a Mother May I situation, because it's not you're getting XP based on me as the DM's interpretation of whether or not you guys are worthy of it now or not, right? It's just time served, and you can do whatever you like, right? So that it empowers the players to behave however they want to behave, which can be dangerous, granted. But I mean, the punishment for misbehaving in the setting should be punishment of the setting, right? Like if somebody's acting in a way that is inappropriate for, let's say, 12th century Baghdad, the punishment should come from the 12th century Baghdadians, right? Not from XP penalties or something. And Jacob says the problem with milestones is that it doesn't work in a sandbox game. Yeah, well, to a certain point, you're absolutely right. Because if it's a sandbox game, the idea is that the DM isn't the one crafting his brilliant adventure for you, right? That's why what I'm suggesting is something that works in a sandbox, right? You give set XP for time served, period, right? Then it works. And Jacob says, Wizards of Blantree taught me that radiation will give me magic powers if I don't die of cancer or become a mutant freak. Yeah, that's Mystara, ladies and gentlemen. Sadwings Raging says, that's called, Biokim says, that's called method acting. Sadwings Raging says, you take on the persona of your character. Chris Miller says, at that moment, I was a marine biologist. Al says, bio, try telling that to Venture. uh, Hernan Hertz says, saludos desde Argentina. Hernán, gracias y bienvenido. Y te diría que vengas a jugar rol en Uruguay, pero ahora con tu nuevo presidente, capaz que las cosas mejoran ahí. Andás a saber, capaz que yo visito en vez más seguido. Al says, well, Pundit wear ascots and scarves all summer. That's a very good question. It was really heating up here, and I thought, okay, Monday I'm going to do a live stream, and now people are going to see me just in like a shirt because it's going to be too hot for anything else. But then suddenly, over the weekend, we hit this cold spell, which sometimes happens even as late as early December. And it's not like a real cold. It's not like winter now, right? But it's like right now, I think it's 14 degrees Celsius, it being nighttime. Here it's actually just struck midnight, right? And 14 degrees Celsius is cold enough that I can wear my what people seem to think is my costume. It's not my costume. It's just how I normally dress in the winter. I said, what the hell? You know, people are expecting me now to wear the scarf. Trust me, a month from now, there is no chance in hell you're going to see me looking like this. You're going to see me wearing like, I don't know, probably some kind of a button-up T-shirt or something, you know? Like a short-sleeved Hawaiian shirt or something like that. Sadwings Raging says, I have a 20,000 Bolivar bill in my wallet. I carry it around to show people what happens if you print too much money. It is well past spring right now, Chris. It's just that once in a while you get, because you know Uruguay is on the it's well below the equator, and it's a coastal area, and the coastal wind sometimes flies straight up from Antarctica. And so suddenly, like last week, it had hit, I think, like 35, 36 degrees Celsius, which is like searingly hot summer for those of you who don't know what what it is in Celsius. And now it's down to 14, right? And 14 is like, in a lot of places, people would think that's it's not below freezing, right? But it's chilly weather, right? Chilly enough that I can still dress in my current uniform, I guess we'd say. Lictionary says, for Star Adventure, what books would you recommend for monsters and supplemental materials? Well, that's a good question. I would say that you could certainly use some of the stuff that you get in the World of the Last Sun books. Some of the ones that are less goofy anyway, and you can import those into Star Adventure. I think there's a monsters book in what is it? Stars Without Number that you could probably make use of. And definitely you could check out Machinations of the Space Princess by Grim Jim, by James Disborough, right? Which is a really, it's quite a good, slightly gonzoer space opera setting game, actually, that he did a while back. And so it's a good complement with Star Adventure. But you can also kind of just make up your own, right? Like, I mean, in Star Adventure, there are rules, there are like templates for creating intelligent alien species, right? That are basically, they go off archetype. What I would suggest is that you do something similarly going off archetype for alien animals or creatures, you know, if that's what you're looking for. Chris Miller says, my Anchor RPG doesn't use class all day, but your Anchor RPG isn't OSR, for starters, right? So there isn't the same need as XP as in D&D. The game still has XP technically, but it's used to increase skills, yeah. So But again, not an OSR game. So that this whole debate is very much tends towards being an OSR debate, right? Because it's not a debate that really happens in other contexts. Lanjigo says you can play D&D without being an adventurer. Just play as a strong farmer rancher who expels everyone that tries to invade, take his land, like John Dutton from Yellowstone. Yeah, well, talk about domain level play. Yeah, that's true. There's probably going to be a bit of that in Baptism of Fire because it's going to have mechanics for running, your a dominion, a territory that has been granted to you, or that you've carved out yourself in the incredible empty monster-filled wilderness of Poland, and then you have to protect it from your own peasants and from your useless retainers and from the neighboring nobles and from monsters and all kinds of things. And that's a whole potential campaign right there. Marshall Miller says, I hate games where it turns into debate negotiation with the DM for what gives experience. That's just chaos milestone with extra steps. Exactly. So that's part of why in my games it's very clear how you get experience. Marshall Miller says, seeing Pundit with a t-shirt on will be like a face reveal. Yeah. Pundit will be in khakis, Crocs, and a wife beater. Well, no, not really. I'll probably be in jeans and a button-up, like Hawaiian shirt or something. Calvin only says Americans will use anything other than metric to measure with. Raziel says, I missed the debate, was watching Timcast. Sorry to hear that. You should have chosen me. I mean, Timcast, I've never watched his live streams, right? But if his live streams are anything like his videos, then Tim Pool will say something and then he'll say it again every 5 minutes for a half hour. So like, where does that get you watching that? Anyway, I guess that's about everything I had to say today. I hope everybody's been enjoying this. If you have any last minute questions, I'll give a little bit of time for people to ask. Wow, we still got 96 viewers. We had hit like 100, and I forget I don't remember where our peak was, but it was like way over 100, which is just remarkable. I mean, I guess people do enjoy this. I thank you everyone for watching, first of all, and listening, and for those of you who contributed in the chat. If you just discovered me or something, then please subscribe and share this video anywhere you think people find it interesting or get pissed off about it. 132 at one point. Thank you, Will. Jerry Harris says more meatball. Yeah, she will not be happy about this, ladies and gentlemen, but here's some more meatball. There's meatball. Here's a meatball. Action meatball. Wave to the people, meatball. No, she is not pleased with this. You got to remember, meatball's an old lady, and she feels it's undignified, So not very good. Not very good. So, anyways, I guess Sean Sleeve says, I appreciate you have the courage to show your face this long on this YouTube channel for us. All right, well, I don't know if it's really a courage issue here, but I appreciate that. Sadwich says, you just keep fighting for sanity, Pundit. Thank you very much. And remember, if you guys want to support me, if you want to support me, the best way to do that is by buying my products. My games like Lion and Dragon, Sword and Caravan, brand new Heroes and Villains of the Silk Road, and probably coming out within a week or two, maybe, issue 1 of the Pundit Files. Right? If you want to pick up, short supplements that are going to cost, less than $10 for sure. Most of them are probably going to be less. Probably going to be about $4.99. Let's say so, or about $3.50. Or something like that. Yeah. Anyways, you're going to get it for a low price, and it gives you something to use in your games, and it's like you're giving me a tip. You're buying me a coffee. If you've already got all my products, or you're not interested in my products, You could always just, give me a super chat or a super thanks on this channel, or you can sign up to my Patreon if you like. The Patreon has nothing on it; it does nothing, but it's for people who have either bought every book of mine or don't actually play RPGs, but they like, the fact that I fight the good fight politically, I guess you could say, and want to support me. I really appreciate everyone who does that. But obviously check out my games, because if you get my games, you're going to get stuff that you can actually use in your gaming if you're a gamer. If you've already got everything, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Um, so a lot of people saying nice things about Meatball. Meatball appreciates that, guys. Calvin only says grumpy cat. Yeah, well, she is. She's more crotchety in her old age. Marshall Miller says Pundit gains +1 experience for a social encounter. Yeah, but I don't know if I'm already maximum level or not. Andrew Jackson says Dark Albion needs an Age of King Arthur supplement. Well, probably that would be cool. I actually ran an entire Arthurian campaign using Lion and Dragon, but I mean, if you want to get that, then just get an old copy of the Great Pendragon campaign. That is the greatest Arthurian supplement ever made. I couldn't possibly equal that, I think. So the likelihood of me trying is pretty low, unfortunately. L says, comment with a super thanks after the stream. If you like people, it's the same as a super chat and helps the algorithm. Okay, I appreciate that, L. Sad Rings Raging says, I hear you get 50 XP for meatball head scratching. Well, I don't know if I get XP, but I certainly get a lot of pleasure out of making meatball feel comfortable. What else have we got to say here before we go? There we go. Sean Silly says, I'm interested in your products, especially that I get a chance to pick your brain slightly here and be reacting. Well, I appreciate that. Jonathan Ball says, what kind of pipe do you use? Well, I have tons of pipes. I use a variety of different pipes. This pipe is a Lorenzetti egg, Solitario. So very, very good brand. It's one of my favorite brands. The two brands that I have the most of are Lorenzetti, which are an Italian brand, and Nerup, which is, I believe, a Danish brand. Both of them make incredible pipes. This pipe's in Europe. And they're in the mid-range prices. Right? I do have some very expensive pipes, and I have some very cheap pipes. When I was young, I liked to buy expensive pipes because I thought those were going to be the very best ones. Now I like playing this game of trying to find inexpensive pipes that I think are going to smoke way above their price range, and I often get it right. Luckily, I mean, I guess that's what experience does. So there you go. I've got like detect pipe quality as a skill from leveling up. All right. So what else have we got to say here? Saturn's Raging says I bought most of Pundit stuff. It is great stuff. Thank you. Marshall Miller says thank you for streaming. Looking forward to the Pundit files. Well, it's coming up real soon. El says Pundit needs to do a pipe collection video. Well, I did a short one where I panned over all of the pipes I use. Anyways, I don't remember how long ago that was, but it's got to be on the channel still. Yosemite Mike says the problem with periodicals like that is that much of the content is usually not useful for me. Well, again, here it's not going to be a subscription model after all. So you check out the issues that you like. I mean, if you go on drive-through right now, you can go to Spectre Press and look at, there's 109 issues of RPG Pundit Presents. And so out of those 109 issues, I bet you're going to find more than one that probably could be useful to you in some way or interesting to you in some way. And obviously the Pundit files is just starting, but over the course of time, it's going to be the same level of variety. Steam Up says, I would support you for not fighting the good fight, apolitical OSR for the win. Yeah, but that is the fight I'm fighting. I'm fighting so that normal gamers can just game like normal people. And my games are normal games for normal gamers. They're not like, like Venger in the Red Room add contemporary political messages to some of their books. None of mine are like that. Okay. So anyways, I guess that's about it now. Steambum says things that are all American: coffee, lever action, and corncob pipes. Well, if you're into pipes or you want to get into pipes, I strongly recommend getting a Missouri Meerschaum, because see, this pipe, this is a what would be $150, $200 pipe. This is a $20 pipe probably by the Missouri, but it's got to be the Missouri Meerschaum company, right? They're not sponsoring me or anything, just so you know, YouTube. But this is entirely voluntary. People think corncob pipes must be crappy, but actually, a $20 corncob is going to smoke infinitely better than a $30 or $50 briar wood pipe. It smokes, these two pipes smoke about as well in terms of quality. All right. The only difference is this one will burn out eventually, right? It'll wear out a lot longer. This one, in theory, will outlive me, right? The other one won't. But if you're looking to get into pipe smoking, or you've already gotten one pipe, but you realize you need more than one because you shouldn't smoke more than the same pipe more than once in a day or once every couple of days. So corncob pipes are a fantastic way to go. If they're good quality ones, and the best quality ones are the Missouri Meerschaum ones, which you can buy online and everything, you know. So what are you waiting for? If you're a pipe smoker, be sure to check that out. All right. Oda Manjiro says, do you have an update on status of Baptism of Fire? Yeah, we talked about it before. The publisher is right here. Chris Miller is the publisher of Baptism of Fire, and he says it's on track, which means it'll be out before the end of this year, in theory. So I hope that works out, and it looks like it will. But if not, it'll be shortly thereafter, right? So it is absolutely on track. All right, then I guess this is it for today, guys. Thank you so much again. Keep your eyes open. Watch my social media. Hit the notification bell here if you haven't for the YouTube, because I put community posts, which are mainly pictures of Meatball, so you don't want to miss that. But they also have important announcements sometimes and notifications of product, right? So check that out and follow me on Twitter and everything else. And anyways, guys, I'll let you guys know when the next live stream will be. I think I'm going to continue doing live streams fairly periodically over the summer, now that some of my other social activities are on summer break. So expect more of these. And thank you, everyone. I guess we'll leave it for tonight. Take care. Now, how do I turn this off? I never know how to turn this thing off. That's add guest. Oh, here we go. All right, guys. See you later.